Good morning, everybody. My name is Kyle Houchins. I'm a technical trainer for McNeil, and this is Getting Started Rhino for Windows. Um, I've had some criticism in the past of some of the Getting Started videos where folks who are new came in and said, wow, this is a lot of drinking out of a fire hose for somebody who's just getting started, um, and complaining that some of the Getting Started videos are models that are too hard. Um, My response to that is, I guess, how are you ever going to learn to fly if no one throws you off the roof of a building? So, we're going to throw you off the roof of a lower building today, though. So this model that we're going to do is this little robot, which is not my design. It's a design that I have heavily borrowed from an existing design that's out there, kind of in the tin toy world. Anybody who knows anything about me, I spent 20 years of my career, 25 years, 28 years of my career. Actually, I still slightly in or out of the toy industry. And so I've done a lot of modeling for Mattel, Hasbro, um, Leapfrog, you name it. I've probably worked for them in the toy industry. So um, my roots with the toy biz goes back a long way. I worked for Marvel way back in the day. Their toy company, Toy Biz, and Buddy L, and Kenner, and a lot of these places aren't even around anymore. So toys are always a kind of fun for me. But this tin toy is an interesting modeling project, and we can look at it a couple of ways. We can look at it from a hyper realistic point of view, which we're not going to do. We're going to look at it from a very basic point of view, and we're also going to look at it not necessarily as something that's stamped out of sheet metal, but maybe something that's printed on a 3D printer. So we're going to focus on this kind of like from more of an injection molding kind of point of view, and how do you kind of get rolling with a drawing that you've never seen before and all that kind of stuff. So the way that these videos work is, first of all, they're interactive. I want you to find the chat. I want you to ask questions. If I do something and you have no idea what I did, hit the chat, let me know. I'll back up, do a little breakout. We'll talk about that, go from there. But the way these are structured is I do a drawing either the night before or the morning of, and then I put it away. I don't look at it again, and I try not to even really think about it or plan it, because what I want to do is put myself in the same situation that you're in when somebody walks into your office, hands you a drawing, and says, "Build this," and you've never seen it before, and you have to figure it out on the fly. Now, that leads to some interesting situations in a live demo. Sometimes it goes right into the fan. Anybody who's seen the hammer video I did a couple years ago knows how badly it can actually go. But I don't really sweat that, because what I try to do is show you my thinking when I get into that situation and try and figure out how to model myself out of those problems. And even if the model ends up being a complete and utter piece of crap, it I try to at least talk about some valid concepts along the way, and hopefully give you a little bit more information about how to get going in Rhino, and sometimes even more importantly, how to get back going in Rhino when you've modeled yourself into a problem. So with that said, we'll get rolling, and what we're going to build is this little tin toy robot. And the idea here is somebody just walked into my office and gave me this drawing, and that's it. And as a design consultant for now going on almost 30 years, um, this happens to me a lot. People walk into my office, people email me things all the time that I've never seen, and they say, can you build this? And I say, are there any other views to this model? Do I get any information? Are there any dimensions? And they say, no. And figure it out along the way. So what we're going to do is go on that assumption and say, we've got this awfully drawn, scratchy, undefined, off kilter drawing that we have to figure out how to do something with. And so I'm going to start from scratch on this, and we'll get rid of it. And the very, very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to run the picture command. And picture is going to allow us to browse our hard drive, and we're going to find our drawing, right? And then we're going to just click, and we're going to drag it into the scene. whatever the aspect ratio is of the drawing, that's what it's going to come in. You don't have to hold shift or anything like that. You can just drag it into the scene. And what this is actually is just a plane, right? This is actually a piece of geometry. This is a surface. If you look up here, we get one open surface added to the selection, and it has an image mapped onto it. And if we go over here to our materials, and if you don't have a materials tab, right click on any other existing tab, go down, find the materials, and check it. We'll go to our materials tab, and we'll notice that there's already a material propagated into this list. And if we click on it and we go down here to the properties, you can see that the texture name is robot. It's self-illuminated, which allows it, to not have to rely on lighting around it. And then its transparency is actually set to 0. And what we're going to do is actually crank the transparency up a little bit to make it dimmer. And the idea behind that is if we left it, full contrast and you drew over it, you wouldn't be able to see it very well. And so I always try and dim these out so that they're just reference and not something that's just like totally in your face. The other thing I like to do is I actually move the model out, or move the drawing out of the modeling window. And the reason for that is this: if I model something and I go into shaded mode or I go into rendered mode, the model cuts a drawing in half. I can't see the model. I can't see the drawing anymore. So I usually drag this out of the modeling window. It's still in front view, positioned exactly where I need it to be, but it's in perspective view. I can actually still say like, okay, well, I need to be up here in this kind of this. All right. So I move this out of the way. The other thing about pictures that's really cool is all of the gumball tricks apply. So if you haven't seen the gumball party tricks video, that's your homework after this. Go to our Rhinoceros 3D on YouTube, which I think I put in the chat, and search for gumball party tricks. That's a one where I talk about all the different stuff that gumball can do. But we can do things like we can drag and copy another piece of this off. So if we wanted to reposition it, we could do all the stuff that we could normally do with a plane and gumball. So if we wanted to create, say, a reference cube, if we had a right, front, top, whatever, we could have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 15, 25 drawings in the scene and position them however we wanted to position them, so that as we rotated around the model, we'd have all our references. The other thing that I like to do is, especially if I'm creating a reference cube, like I do a lot of automotive modeling, and excuse me, I'm gonna mute for just a second. Spare you my old man clearing of my throat. So I do a lot of automotive modeling, and what I typically do is I'll have a front view, top view, right view, bottom view, side view, whatever. And I'll arrange those around in the scene, and then I'll actually create layers for those. And so on this guy, we'll go to our layer stack. I'm going to right click on one, and I'm going to change object layer. And then I'm going to double click, and I'm just going to rename it. And the nice thing about this is now that it's here, I can either turn it on or off, and I can lock it, which means I can work over it without selecting it, right? So I think we're in pretty good shape as far as this goes. Now, the one thing that this drawing is for a particular challenge, I'm going to unlock this, is it's tilted, right? So I kind of unpurposely did this drawing particularly badly to try and like show kind of an accurate representation of what you get from clients a lot. Hopefully I'm not throwing any of my clients under the bus, but yeah, tighten up, folks. It helps us a lot. So let's grab this, and I'm going to use the nose as a center-ish line. And then I'm going to run the rotate command. Remember I said this is just a plane, right? So we can do anything that we can do with a plane, we can do with this drawing. And I'm going to come down here and kind of grab the center line of this model, and then I'm just going to rotate it until it's vaguely aligned more to the world. See, our drawing is off kilter here, but the image actually is not bad. This is a lot better situation for modeling than trying to model, with your head tilted to the side and try and figure out how to do all that kind of stuff. So we'll lock it, and then let's just jump in. And this guy's made up of a bunch of different cubes. And what we're going to do is we're going to start, like, maybe we start with the body, since that's kind of an easy place to start. And we can get the ish of this drawing, like, kind of, this is like a chamfer here and this is a chamfer here, but chances are on a robot these chamfers would match, even though the drawing is trash. So we'll draw this kind of as we kind of expect, and I'm going to start with a grid snap, and I'm going to start in the center, and I'm going to turn the grid snap off because I don't really like drawing with grid snap, and I'm going to kind of like just vaguely trace this thing. And if I want these two to match, what I might actually do is make this a symmetrical object, which means I probably only want to come down to about there. And then let's mirror this, and I have a hotkey. The command is mirror, but I have a hotkey set up for it, and all of the transform tools live down here. So mirror lives, I always use my hotkey. Where is it? It's in here somewhere. Anyway, you have to trust me. It's in here somewhere. Mirror, there it is. I never use the icon. I don't know what it looks like. Everybody's confidence in my training is fading at the moment. And so then I'm going to just adjust this a little bit to kind of feel a little bit more like the drawing. Now, look what happened. As I moved the top one, the bottom one moved away. That's because history was on. So I'm actually going to shut history off for the time being, and I'm going to unclick all of this stuff and leave that off. And then because these two objects have history on them, I'm going to run the history purge command, and I'm going to get rid of that. And so now I can move these two together, and we don't have any kind of wonk going on with that. And so I'm going to land the top one there, and I'm going to scale in one direction. And the command is scale 1D, and then we're going to mirror again, and that is a nice symmetrical object. And then I ran join to join those four curves into one closed curve. Join commands over here. All right, so that gives us our main body. Now, we need to talk about how to do objects like this for a second, because we have to think about, like, this is the logical way to go, right? Now, we have to think about this a little bit in the fact that this is actually a cube with chamfered edges on it. And is it easier to draw this thing with the chamfers in it, or is it easier just to draw a cube and then let Rhino put the chamfers on there for you? And I would argue actually that this is the wrong approach. So I'm actually going to get rid of that, and we're going to go back to just a square, and I'm going to do this from the center, and I'm going to start at 0, and I'm going to just drag the approximate width, and then I'm going to move this up. The reason I did this is because landing a square at 0 and scaling it is a lot easier than trying to just, place it in space. So I'm going to do this instead, and the reason for this is, and I could actually even use a cube for this, I'm going to just extrude a little curve out of here, right? And we're going to make that the basic thickness. And we can iterate over this and decide how thick we want this to be, and it can be thicker or thinner or whatever. We can do that however we want. And we don't have any information on that, so we kind of have to figure it out on the fly. And I think maybe that's a little too fat. And let's cap it. Now, and I can even get rid of this curve if I want. Now, over here in the solid tools, there's a chamfer tool that we can go ahead and just drag chamfers on here. And if I turn preview on and run it, you can see that that's way too big. So we'll come up here and say set all, and we'll say like 0.25. And let's look at our drawing and see in wireframe what it looks like. And that's probably okay for these, but these need to be a little bigger, right? These are not quite landing on our drawing. So let's go here. Let's go back to the perspective view. And let's adjust these a little bit. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do this in two pieces. Let's go run a chamfer again, and let's just do these edges and get them right first. And we can see that this 0.25 is probably not quite enough. So let's do set all, and let's do like, I don't know, 0.5. Let's get a lot bigger. And that's probably a little too much. So let's go back and let's do like I don't know, 4, something like that. And that feels pretty good. I'm pretty happy with how that looks. So we're going to run it. And then we're going to run chamfer again, and we'll get the edges on this thing. And so what I'm going to do now is instead I'm going to use the face edges, and I'm going to pick this face and that face. And instead of running that at 0.4, which it runs, but they're too big, I'm going to do set all, and I'm going to do 0.25 because actually I like that better from the other one. We can see that we end up with the main body of this thing that kind of feels about what we want, right? Now, there's something that we need to talk about a little bit when it comes to CAD models, right? And it depends on intent. If you're going to print this to a 3D printer, this model is going to come out really kind of nice and crisp right out of the printer, especially if you're using like an SLA or something like that. And sometimes for like injection molded parts, you want stuff just a little bit softer than that. And so you would be tempted to go back and actually fill it all these little edges, which you could do, and that is certainly a case when you can do that. If you're going to CNC this, instead of modeling all those little fillets, you can just machine this thing with a small ball end mill, and you're going to get all those fillets for free. Anything that's an inside fillet, if you think about that, it's gonna machine all that stuff. Is going to get, by the time it gets off the machine, it gets cleaned up and all that kind of stuff, you're going to get your little fillets on there anyways. If you're going to print this same thing, by the time it gets printed and sanded and cleaned up and primed and painted and all that kind of stuff, the little fillets and stuff will be added on there anyway. So if you're in a shop environment and you're trying to make prototypes, you can lie, cheat, and steal a lot when it comes to little fillets just in the finishing process, and it'll save you a lot of time modeling. There's also a tool in Rhino called Soften Edges, and if we go up here to the properties, there's this edge softening thing. So if your intent is rendering, and I turn this on, look what happens. And I go to rendered mode, and we need to switch to something other than white so you can see it. Let's add a new material. Let's just make this red. Actually, we'll make it bluish because that's what this robot's going to kind of end up doing. Something like that. And you can see that that edge softening actually goes in and throws a nice little radius on there. So if you're going to render, that's a fast way to get in and out of, not having to add a million little fillets either. And we can change the softening setting here. 0.1 is probably too big. So if we go 0.05, you can see that that tightens up and it ends up being, nice and soft. Now, there is a rendering penalty for this. It does take a little bit of computational overhead. So if you don't have a strong graphics card, the real-time rendering when you're rotating around and stuff is going to beat you up a little bit on that. So use that wisely and only when you're getting ready to start rendering. All right, so we've got the basis of our body, and we need to decide like how crazy do we want to get about detailing this thing. When we print it, do we want it to look like it's actually two pieces of tin pressed together, or are we just gonna wing it and say, it's a chunk of plastic, and we go from there. I'm gonna say let's go a little bit down that road, and let's put a centerline curve through here, and let's wire cut this thing in half. And we are gonna keep, we're not gonna delete the objects, and we're gonna keep all, and we're gonna go from there. So we've got 1/2 here and 1/2 here. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna scale this guy just a tiny bit like that, and then I'm gonna smush it over just so we've got this kind of like uneven, like unmatched parting line. And maybe we even want to fake it a little bit, and maybe we want to sneak this so that it's not quite even, We just pull it up just a little bit. just so it has a little visual mismatch in there so it looks like it's not exactly perfect. And then I'm just going to Boolean these guys back together. All right. And now let's go and look at the detailing on this thing, and let's follow this chess piece all the way through to the end. And it's got a couple of details on here, and I'm going to draw those all at one time. So I'm going to start with a rounded rectangle, and I'm going to just try and drag that in here. I'm going to copy and paste, and the reason I'm copying and pasting is I actually like the slight variation in it's not exactly perfect, whereas an offset would be perfect. I like that it's got, just a little almost little hand character to it. And I might even use nudge to move it just a little bit so it's like misregistered a little bit so it looks a little funner, right? And then same thing over here. I'm going to just draw a circle and I'm going to copy paste. Oops. Paste, Control C, Control V, Shift drag on the scale handle, and I'm going to create my offset in there. And then same thing, I'm going to just like misregister this thing just a tiny bit so that it's just a little bit off. Same thing down here, rounded, like that. Again, copy paste, Control C, Control V, Shift drag on a handle. And again, just for consistency's sake, we're going to mess that up just a little bit so that it's not quite perfect. And then we can go and draw our detailing in here. So let's do that. So I'm going to just draw, I'm going to find kind of like where the midline is on this. That. And then we can draw a little pointer out here. And then to get this little like array of details in here, I'm going to kind of draw a circle somewhere probably around like that. And let's split this by a point. So I'm going to split, I'm going to use the point option, and I'm going to split this kind of here and here. And then we're going to draw a ellipse off the center of this thing, kind of like that. And then we're going to transform array along curve. And we're going to get this object. This is the path curve. And we're going to use, I don't know, 5. That. And the orientation, let's do, I don't know, no rotation we don't want. Freeform kind of gets a little out of shape. And if we do road-like, it's kind of doesn't really give us much. So maybe we do go back and we'll do just a little bit of adjustment on this to make them feel a little bit better. And I'm gonna just use the gumball arrow as a good tangency kind of indicator, kind of look at it like that. Those 2 center points on the ellipse make a good reference point too. So if I just kind of aim for that. And this whole thing is, it's a little bit too big. So maybe I grab all of these guys. It's one of the things I like about toys. There's a lot of like, just does it look cool? If it doesn't look cool, then you get rid of it. If it looks cool, then you do it. And I'm going to steal this pointer because I already made one. So I'm going to just move it over here. And I'm going to set my gumball, relocate gumball to the center of this circle down here. And I think my center snap is off. Yep. I'm going to set it to, and I'm going to scale it down a little bit. And then we'll rotate it, kind of something like that. And then I can steal one of these guys because I already made one. No need to redraw it. And I'm going to just orient it a little bit and scale it down. And then I'm going to do a polar array. transform array polar. And then the center of the polar array is going to be this. And we're going to do, I don't know, 8 of these. 12. Let them run. That good. And then down here, we've got all sorts of stuff that we can do. So we'll just draw a square here. And we'll draw a square here. And we'll draw one of these little light bulb elements. And we'll do an ellipse like that. And then we'll cut it in half. Like that. Here we'll use one called curve Boolean. This is fun. Delete all the input. And then I'm going to just click right in there. And it combines bunches of curves into one curve. So like this guy, I want this kind of all to be one curve. I'm going to grab this for Boolean, and I'm going to click outside. And what it's going to do is it's going to trace everything it sees and then delete everything else. And then we can just drag, tap Alt, and get those little details. And again, we don't want them spaced perfectly because all this stuff is like splashed on at a factory somewhere in a probably not a lovely conditions, and they're just trying to get through their day, so they're not super precise after they've made the 17,000th one of these. I'm going to make this, drag, tap Alt, and then these little details. And then I'm going to make the inside with a rounded rectangle. I'm going to set the gumball, relocate the gumball. Using a center snap to there, and then I'm going to drag and use an O snap to snap it to the center, and then I'm going to just rotate this in space. If your gumball is not behaving like mine is, come down here to the properties and change it to snappy dragging. That will allow it to respond to O snaps. If it's set to smooth dragging, it won't respond to O snaps. And then we can steal this, drag, tap Alt, drag, tap Alt, drag, tap Alt, drag, tap Alt, and I'm going to rotate this guy, relocate the gumball to the center here, and then I'm going to rotate this guy around, and then that one, we're just going to use what we've got, kind of do this kind of stuff. I'm going to try it out. Try this out. Oops, not that one. Got those guys detailed out. Let's do these pieces up here. I don't even know what these are, but I'm going to use a rounded rectangle and a regular rectangle. I'm going to curve Boolean those. Love that curve Boolean tool for doing stuff like this because it's super fast. And then it looks like there's another element up here that's a little bit like this one. So let's just steal this one, rotate it. And again, I'm not being super precise because the whole concept behind this thing is it's a little messy and it's a little sloppy, which is particularly suited to my modeling style. And let's paste. And we need a gear, and gears are super fun to do with curve Boolean because we can just draw something like this, and then we can draw a vague kind of gear shape, transform polar array, something like that, and then grab curve Boolean, outside, it's going to trace the outside of everything. If I clicked inside, it would be tracing the inside, and then I get that, right? Super fast. I know, I think there were some benchmark guys that were going to join us today. Curve Boolean is going to be your new best friend as far as laying out stuff in 3D or 2D for your 3D models. And then I used a 3-point curve because I don't have a really good center point on this, but I want this element to be centered. So I'm actually going to just use the outside of it. And then I'm going to copy paste. Gives me that little detail. And then we'll draw kind of this little detail. And I'm going to hit the M key on a line and check out what happens. The M key with enter actually changes this now to a different, changes it to an arc. And so I'm going to click down here, and then I'm going to hit M enter again, and it goes back to being a straight line. M enter, and it makes an arc. So I can do this kind of like belt detail. Copy paste, shift drag, and we don't want it to be like perfect, so I'm going to just misalign this a little bit. And then I'm going to use this and this as trimming objects. We're going to trim stuff out. Super accurate depiction of gears, right? And then we've got some kind of junk up here. I don't even know really what this is, but we'll throw something up here. And scale that down, and then we'll draw. We can steal something like down here. Hit it. So even if you're not really into this particular model, right? And then I hear people running for the door. So the goal here is basically talking about like, we're talking a lot about like 2D layout stuff. And then once we get all of the 2D stuff, then we're going to break this surface up using these details. And so that is another whole process. Now, the way that I'm going to show you, it looks like I moved this one instead of copying it. So I'm going to just put it back. So once you get all this stuff laid out, right? And then what we can do is project this onto this face. And what we're going to do actually is we're going to do an operation called split face. What this does is I can pick a face, and then the split axis is actually going to be all of these curves. And I'm going to rotate around here so I can see them. And then I'm going to go back to front view and say, okay. And what it's going to do is it's going to project all of those curves onto the surface, but it's also going to split the surface up into a bunch of different pieces. And the cool thing about that is now I can start playing with it. And this is now still one object, but each individual piece has been broken up into individual pieces. So now we can come down here and the fun begins. We can start doing things like extrude surface. And I can grab this and I can start pulling this out, and I can start pushing these guys. Maybe these guys come out a little bit, right? Like that. And then maybe this comes out. Maybe this comes out a little less. All right, and so now we're detailing. We're doing this really quickly, right? Because all of this stuff is already broken up in a way that makes a lot of sense. So we can come in here and grab all this stuff. And I did a video called Nernies and Greebles, which is a term that I picked up in the toy industry for putting like nonsense detailing on a model. And this is the process that we use to do that. So if you've seen that one, this will feel familiar. Now, the cool thing, and I debated on whether or not to do this in 7 or 8. In version 8, there is a new way of doing this called push-pull. And push-pull allows you to basically like just project a curve onto a surface. You don't even have to split the surface. It's just a projected curve, and it finds what the region is and allows you to push-pull and do this kind of stuff. It's a similar operation, but it's a little bit faster and a little bit more elegant. So let's add the detailing on this. And we'll go out here, right click. And we don't want all this stuff to kind of be the exact same height. So we're going to just kind of randomly bring things in or out depending on what feels kind of interesting. And I'm going to shift click these other pieces down here out. Just a little bit. And let's bring all of this out together. Oops. Interesting. That one out by itself first. That was an odd little bug. It wiped out everything. So we'll bring it out one at a time. Love when a Rhino every so once in a while. It's like, I don't know if you guys have watched that soccer show. The character Roy Kent. Sometimes Rhino just goes, no. So let's bring all of this stuff out together. And I'm going to do this a little bit differently. Let's see how's the best way to do this all at once. Because what I want to do is I want to bring all of these details out at once. And so let's go to wireframe. And let's sub-object select this with a shift drag. That. And that gives us all of that stuff, but we don't want this, so I'm going to control click the back. Shift drag that. And I want to not select a pane. Try this again. I think what I'm going to do is just extract these because it's going to be easier. So let's get right click on this, extract these surfaces, and get rid of that one and that one. And extract that, and we'll join them. And then what I'm going to do is extrude this whole thing out using Gumball. And what it did is it now turned this into a block, but I don't want the back of this, so I'm just going to come over here, Control Shift drag, get rid of the back, and then join it back in. That's the one nice thing about push pull is it's a little bit more flexible when it comes to that kind of stuff. So it's like you can do. I would have been able to do all those faces together. So let's go back and finish detailing this out. So we're going to come down here, extrude surfaces. Let's do these guys first, and that one, and then we'll go back and do the other ones. So let's pull these out a little bit, and then we'll grab that, and that, and that, and that. All right, let's go to render mode and see how we're doing. So we're looking pretty good so far. Let's finish the detailing on the rest of this. And again, we're just going to keep going through that same process. Maybe I'll get these guys all same. additional piece. Do that. And you can see once you get this broken up, right, the detailing stuff, it starts to go pretty quick. And in the Nernies and Greebles video, I did like kind of a really hyper detailed thing, but you can see that we're back. We've got this guy kind of settled out, right? So now let's look at there was a couple other little details. There was like some little rivet details or something on this guy. And let's go ahead and add those. And so the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to project some curves onto this. And I'm going to shift drag, or I'm going to drag and tap Alt to get the copy of that. And actually, I'm going to just drag these over here and tap Alt. And that one's too far away, so I'm going to move it in. And then I'm going to just project these, right? I'm going to grab these guys, shift drag, and I'm going to use project. I'm going to project that onto the body. And you can see what happens is we end up with these curves projected onto the surface. So I'm going to delete those because I don't need them anymore. And then I'm going to use that as a reference for adding a little sphere detail, which is going to be our rivet here. And then I'm going to copy it down there with shift drag. And then just while I'm at it, because it's easy to do now, because we're already in the process of moving these things, I'm going to copy these around, add one to the beginning of each. And then what I can do is use transform array, linear, and I'm going to pick, actually I want it to be along a curve, sorry, transform array along curve, and that's the object to array, that's the path curve, and you can see it just runs it right along the path curve. And if we want to use more, we can just do 11, because I've got preview turned on, and so that allows you to be able to preview it before you commit. So I'm going to do the same thing again. Object, curve, right click again, object, curve, right, same thing again, object, curve. Same thing over here. Might even be able to cheat and do both of these at the same time. And then we can get rid of our curves, and our little details are on there. We can give them the same material. All right, and then we can break this up. Because these are different surfaces and stuff, if we wanted to add more materials, like say we wanted to add a red, and I'm gonna kind of tweak that red a little bit so that it's kind of a little more, something like that. And we can Control Shift click and do sub-object assignments, and we can start breaking this up by material. Without having to explode the model, right? So we can add detailing to it like that. So let's call that good. And I'm going to save this. I'm 44 minutes into a demo, live demo, and I haven't saved yet. So let's do that. All right. So that was a lot of kind of fiddly bits in there to get that. Let's do that same process with the head. And to make things simple, I'm going to just layer this. I'm going to put it on a layer. So I'm going to call this body, and I'm going to change object layer, and then I'm going to just hide that for now so that we don't mess it up. Now, same thing with the head. Now we've got some options on how we're going to do the head here, and I think we're going to do that just a little bit differently. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to start just with a cube that makes up the whole size of the head. And if I go into perspective view, I can that is, maybe we bring our body back so we can see it in relation. That's too big. Kind of like that. All right. Now, what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to do the same thing that I did before, kind of conceptually, but I'm going to break this up into a couple of different objects, and I'm going to do that with split. So I'm going to split using a curve. And then, so these are now individual objects, but I'm going to go back and I'm going to join them all back together. And what this did was, and because this is a degree 1 object, right? It's only got 2 control points in any direction. If I were to turn the control points on, you can see for the surfaces, you can see that these are just, 2 by 2s, right? There's no internal structure on these things. So what I can do now, which is something that's really cool, is I can Control Shift click. I can just do some like kind of direct modeling stuff. Grab all of these faces. I can shift drag like that. Maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe what I want to do is these guys. Do these. That's what I'm looking for. I can start to like directly manipulate this thing to get kind of shape and feel that I'm looking for. So this thing looks like it needs to come in a little bit, down a little bit. And because these are degree 1 surfaces, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, degree 1, it just means that there's only 2 control points in these surfaces going in any direction. It makes it super easy for Rhino to be able to manipulate this stuff. And so if these were degree 3 and they had more control points, you could still do this kind of stuff, but it tends to start introducing some distortion into the model, which starts to become a little bit more difficult to deal with. Now, here's a situation up here. We're going to add this little cutout detail, but I'm actually going to project 2 curves, copy paste. I'm going to scale this one in a little bit and then move it up. And I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to split this using these 2 curves, and then I'm going to join everything back together. And what that allows me to do with this is now I can scale this thing in, and I can scale in one direction. I can just put that little detail back in there. Cool, right? So now we can look at this and say, okay, do we want to add like chamfers or anything like that to the edges? And maybe we do, maybe we don't. I don't know. Maybe we throw a couple of little ones on there. We can always look at it and decide whether we like it or not. And if we don't, we scrap it. If we do, we move on and say that we planned it that way. When really we're just running around in the dark, running into things, hoping for the best. Too big. So let's set all. Let's change that to like 0.1. And that even looks too big. Let's go 0.05. And see how this weird little mismatch is on the corner? We can try and change the rail type, maybe to distance between rails, and see if we can get a better one, or distance from edge. And it's still kind of like cutting that up strange, and that's just because of the way a chamfer goes from one angle to another. And we can either roll with that, or we might even be able to select edges. We might even be able to add a few more edges in here and try and mitigate that. But it's kind of one of the downsides of chamfers. You have to watch your transitions from one surface to another. And let's see if that made it any better. That's a little better, but I don't know. I kind of don't love that. So let's scrap that. Let's just leave them off. I think I'm going to leave it off. one of the things I love about Rhino is it's fast enough that you can design in 3D. And it's something that I harp on a lot in the fact that I really hope that everybody who watches my videos or people who use Rhino use it as an art supply and not a CAD tool. I want you to be creating designs and I want you to be creating art. I don't necessarily want you to be, a mindless CAD monkey who just follows whatever drawing that anybody hands you, because most of the time the drawings that you're going to get are going to be trash. I mean, it's just the reality of the situation is it's and everybody's so busy and everybody's moving so fast that getting a really good crafted drawing these days is pretty tough to come by. And so I always try and encourage people, when you go from a drawing, and especially a drawing that's as much of a piece of crap as this one is, make sure that you're evaluating this stuff in 3D and make sure that what you're doing looks good on the screen. And I always encourage everybody to, you know, to make your decisions in 3D, because the drawings you can lie, cheat, and steal. The model, it is what it is. You're gonna look at it and it's either gonna look good or it's not. And it's Keith, and this is just basic 2D kind of CAD drafting stuff, right? And here, let's do like boom and see what that looks like. More. I'm holding down shift to get it to go in the right direction, and then I'm just setting my distance there. And let's do curve Boolean on these guys and this one. Click in each one of these spaces like that. And we just got to draw our nose. Again, I'm purposely drawing it a little asymmetrical and a little messed up because that's kind of what the real object looks like. All right, let's split. Actually, let's split face because we only want to split the front face. Split this face. We're going to use the curves option. We're going to use these curves. I always do this in an orthogonal view so that it hits the right face. And you can see that because we split face, see, it didn't split the back, whereas split sometimes will go all the way through the model. And then we're back to our little extrude face thing. And I'm going to see if it'll let me do more than one at a time. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I'd love to say I know why, but I don't. That worked. And we could, if we wanted to cheat, we could do that, right? And then pull that out, and that gets us home a little faster than the other side did. Where we just shove that one in and pull the other one out. Maybe we like one side better than the other. I don't know. So that is kind of cool. We'll go with that. All right, so we got these little headphone details on the side. I'm going to do that with let's do that. Let's go to the right view. I'm going to do that with a truncated cone. And I'm going to snap to a corner here so that I know it's placed in the right spot. And then kind of in that shape. And then I'm going to drag it to where I want. I'm going to use snappy dragging to locate it in the center. I'm going to scale it down a little bit. Way too fat. And it has this other little detail in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to Control Shift click. I'm going to drag that, and I'm still dragging, still dragging, still dragging. I'm going to tap Alt. See that little plus that shows up next to my cursor? That means that you're copying that face off. Scale, extrude, poke it in there. Boolean them together. And then if we want, we can add a couple little fillets or something like that to this. They're way too big. Big. Too small. Previous edge selection. And let's go 5. Better. Mirror it over. Better head. All right, now we need to add the little spring detail on the top. And there actually is a coil tool in Rhino. And bear with me, I don't use it very often. I got to find it. It is in here somewhere. Here it is. So helix or vertical helix. And what I'm going to do, let's go to the front view. The start of the axis is going to be kind of right there. And then the front view, the length of the axis is going to be kind of here. And then the radius, we'll do something about like that. And we need more of that. So let's do start, end, and let's do turns. Let's do like 20. Better. And that gives us the spring, right? And then we can adjust this, you know, left, right, whatever. And now we need to add the little bits that come off the bottom. And so what we can do is, there's a couple of ways we could do this. We can put a point kind of right there and another point right there. And then we can use blend curve. And we can go from this curve to a point. And that gives us a curve that just blends tangentially off of that, which kind of might feel like the right thing to do. And then we'll do the same thing over here. Go to a point. And that we want to flip it the other direction. And then we can drag till it kind of makes sense. Oops, picked the wrong spot. Let's do that right. So go from there. Point. Flip it because it's going off the wrong side. Drag it to the end here. There we go. And then we'll adjust the tangency like that. And then what I probably want to do is I probably want to move the point kind of up in there a little bit. Same thing down here. And then we can take this entire thing and join it. And then we're going to pipe it. We're going to just add some thickness to this. And we're going to call it like, I don't know, something like that. That feels probably appropriate. And it's going to create our little spring material for it. And let's see what it looks like. Add some materials so we can kind of keep an eye on what it looks like as we're doing it. And that's mostly what our head is done with. And so now I'm going to delete all these curves because I don't need them anymore. And then we can start, you know, playing with rendering materials and stuff like that. So let's look at, where are we at? We're in an hour. So try to get these done in about an hour and a half. And I think in a half hour we can pull off a leg and an arm, and because they're mirrored. So let's take a look at this. So I'm going to create a cylinder. I'm going to change my direction to none. And the reason that I can do that is because now I can just work in the front view without having to change views. So I set my diameter and then I shift drag to the right, and that allows me to be able to do that. And then I'm going to drag, tap Alt, shift drag for scale, and then I'm going to drag a handle, and that's my arm. And the cool thing about this is these are now aligned because I did them all together. I'm going to drag these in cap, and I'm not going to Boolean them because I'm going to add different materials to them. It doesn't really matter. We can always do sub-object selection, but that. Let's make a new material for those guys. Actually, this one's metal, and this one is metal, but it's a different metal. So we'll come over here and we'll say that's brass. And maybe that's too shiny. So we'll de-roughen, we'll roughen it a little bit, and then we'll mirror this. Oops. Any questions so far? I haven't been paying good attention to the chat. Let's see. How would you make the rectangle solid not capped? There actually is a tool in here for extrude solid versus extrude surface. Extrude planar curve extrudes a surface. Extrude planar surface extrudes a solid. So in order to make the curve capped, I would have had to make it a solid I would have had to make it a surface first and then extrude the surface. Let's see. How would you make the center circle rounded, not flat, i.e. concave? If you wanted to make it concave, I probably would have Booleaned a sphere out of it first, and then worked off of the result that was left. And then where will the recording be available? It's going to be on our YouTube, which I put into the chat at the beginning, and I will compile all this after the video. It takes probably about an hour or 2 hours to rip it, and then I do a little editing and stuff and then get it up. So it should be up by either late today or tomorrow. All right, let's make the arms. So if we go to the right view, and I'm going to go to wireframe, and then I didn't get any information on what the arms look like, so I'm going to just kind of wing it. And the upper arm, I'm going to just kind of do like a little robotic bicep kind of thing, like that. We'll call that good. And then I'm going to connect this. I don't even need to do that. Okay. And then I can Boolean that. And then let's try and figure out like what the lower arm looks like. So I'm imagining there's going to be another little kind of shape like that. And then let's go something like this. Maybe those aren't robotic enough shapes, but we'll roll with it. And then the hand, let's do another kind of circle there. And I think I'm going to just do like kind of like a little claw shape thing. So let's come out like that. 3-point corners, not 10-point corners, just 3. If you want to know why, there's a video called Rule of 3. You can watch that one. That one's on our YouTube as well. All right, I'm going to call that good. All right, and so let's make surfaces out of these guys. I'm going to just grab one and I'm going to extrude it a little bit. Cap. This one extrude it this way a little bit. Cap. Again, because they're curves, they're extruding as surfaces. And this one I'm going to set to the end of that, and then I'm going to extrude this out a little bit like that. And cap. Assign that blue material. Maybe we'll do the red to the hand. And let's just position it. That. And maybe what we'll do is we'll steal this guy, make a little smaller, little pivot detail like that. Copy paste, shift drag, scale, push it through. And we can Boolean all this stuff or not, doesn't really matter. It just depends on what our intent is. If we're going to print this, we can just mash stuff together. If we're going to render it, we can mash stuff together. If it's got to be something that actually needs to be assembled, then then you got to go through and do the work. But I'm all for anytime you don't have to do the work. I'm okay with that. Everybody says lazy. I say efficient. All right, we'll call that good. And then let's grab this whole thing and we're going to mirror. You guys didn't believe me that we can finish the rest of this thing in a half hour. All right, now we got to do a leg. And the leg it's like a little C channel in one direction and then a C channel in the other direction. And we can simulate that just with 2 cubes. And so I'm going to just grab 1 cube like this. Again, like if there's a lot of lying, cheating, and stealing going on here because we can, right? Because the intent on this is just actually this demo. But if it comes into the fact that you need to like actually build these parts out, then you would just go ahead and draw this as the C channel and extrude it, right? And then drag, tap Alt, scale it out just a little bit, in a little bit, shove that on top of that one. That's a little too fat, like that. And this one is metal. And maybe we want to soften the edges on that. Maybe we'll let edge softening do that for us. And we're going to mirror. Got a foot to make. And the foot we might do the same way as the head. We might start with a cube. And we'll make that red just to, and let's line it up kind of something like that. And we're going to do some sub-object modeling here. So I can Control-Shift click an edge, and I can pull this over. And maybe I even pull it down just a little bit. And that gives me kind of that shape. And then maybe I grab this face here, pull that forward. I pull this one back just a little bit. And those have like a little bit of rounded feel to it. So let's go ahead and add some fillets on that. Let's preview it. Maybe a little bit bigger. Feels better. And then this has a shape cut out of it for the top. So let's grab the leg, and I'm going to hit isolate. I have a hotkey set up for that, but the command is set is isolate. And then let's just draw a shape in here that thing should be cut out of. And I'm going to round that because it's probably would have a rounded punch on it instead of just be dead straight like that. And then I'm going to wire cut this object. I'm going to go all the way through it, and then we're going to just delete that piece. This. And I'm going to take this foot, I'm going to shift it just a little back, and I'm going to shift this one just a little forward, just to give it a little bit more interest. Might rotate one of these hands up just a little bit. And let's do it with gumball. Relocate the gumball to the center of this guy. That. And there's a couple of little details on this thing that are kind of interesting. Like there's these two little prongs that stick out of here. So let's go ahead and drop one of those. And I'm going to just do that from the top view. I'm going to do that with a rounded rectangle. And then we'll extrude that just a little bit. It's pretty thin. And then cap it. And then it has this kind of like little punch detail in it, right? And so the way that I'm going to make that is let's do this with a cylinder. And what we want to do is let's make a cylinder kind of about like that and like that. And let's cap it. And I'm going to bring this out a little bit. And you see how it goes on the top and the bottom? That's kind of what we want. And so I'm going to copy this for the time being, but I'm not going to paste it. And then let's add a little fillet to the end of this guy. And I'm going to Boolean these two pieces together. And then I'm going to isolate. Let's do this in shaded view so you can see what I'm doing. And then I'm going to wire cut the top of this off. And that gives me a flat piece like that. But now I can paste that thing that I copied before, shift drag to scale a little bit, and then I got to throw the fillet back on. I'd filleted it afterwards. And then I can do a Boolean subtract. And it gives me that little detail in there. See that? And the end of it doesn't matter because we're going to shove it into the leg. So scale it down, move it. Figure out kind of where it goes. It goes in there. Still too big. Like that. And then we'll mirror it. Like that. Get it positioned correctly. Boolean that in. And then maybe we add just a few little fillets in here because these feel a little harsh. Too big. Yeah. I think we are about out of here. Maybe we want to add some more rendering details in here. Maybe we want to make bits and pieces in here that are different materials. Shift clicking. I'm purposely leaving the sides of these blue because this is like stuff that's like just the paint is just stamped on the front of this. And then right click assign to object. And then, now the fun begins. We can just start playing with this and see what looks cool. See, this looks better black. And I love the fact that you can do this sub-object assignment because it doesn't require you to explode the model. So you can go through and do all of the detailing that you want to do, and you can still have a part with, if you click on this and send it, make a mesh, you can still have something that you can send out, to STL or whatever if you want to print it. We can decide, this is the fun stuff. You can back and forth on this stuff a million times and decide like what you want it to look like and what colors you want to play with and all that kind of stuff. Maybe we need a white in here. Control Shift clicking just to get the sub-object face. You can explode this off, but then then your model's not closed anymore, and you have to, worry about getting it closed back up if you want to print something. You, Control Shift drag, all of that stuff. And I assign it white. And if I back to red, maybe that's faster. All right, get rid of our curves. And I'm going to hide the image because it's screwing up the ground plane. And then we can throw this in ray trace mode. And in an hour and 19 minutes, looks like we've got some interesting rendering choices going on here. I just updated Rhino before I came here, and I'm interested to know what in the world is going on with that rendering. Do I not have an environment? That might be. All right. I never like seeing the rendering, the environment in the rendering, so I'm going to come over here and just shut that off. Go back to Studio. But that's our little finished part. All right. Any questions? Fantastic. So, hour and 20 minutes. Got a little guy. Everything should be solid. We can do cell open poly surface. See if there's anything open, and it looks like there is one open part in here. So let's isolate it and see where it is. And if we turn on show edges, let's see. It looks like there is no naked but one non-manifold. So let's see where that is. And let's zoom to it. And it looks like It's right in there. So let's get rid of it. Looks like there is a little piece of geometry in here that we didn't want. So I'm going to Control Shift drag, get rid of it. Control Shift drag that, get rid of that. And that should let's see if there's any naked edges. Looks like there's a naked edge in there now. So let's fix it. I'm just going to go from here to here. Join it. Now it's a closed object. Add objects. No naked edges, no non-manifold. Bring everything back. So open polysurface again. Nothing lights up. So we know that everything in this model is solid. So if you were to mesh it and send it out to STL, you could print it as it sits. All right. So that's one of the last pre-flight checks I always do, and I'm curious whether that fixed our rendering issue. That might have been. Nope. Boy, that's weird. Huh. Very strange. Let me try something here for a second. Copy this whole thing. I'm wondering if there's something odd with this file. This is my nuclear fix for if something is being super weird. I'll just copy everything, start a brand new file, paste the geometry into a new file, and see if it misbehaved or two. Yeah, it does. Wow, that's really crazy. Oops, I found a stop ship bug. All right, I'll get that written up and go from there. But everything else is good to go. We could grab this guy and we could mesh it, make a whole heap of meshes. And this guy is good to go to a printer as it sits. Okay. File export active as STL. Off you go. Any other questions? Other than why the rendering has pooped its pants, which I can't answer, but somebody is going to. I can tell you that right after this demo. I'm going to start writing some emails. All right. Any other questions? If not, I'll let you go. Thank you very much for joining. My name is Kyle Hutchins. I'm a technical trainer for McNeil. This is Getting Started Rhino for Windows. Go make great stuff. Thanks. Bye. So if you watched the live demo, we were having problems with the ray tracing while it was going, and right after the video ended, I figured out what the problem was. If you go, and if we switch to ray trace, you can see that it actually works now. The problem was if I went to the ray trace settings, something in the original ray trace settings was jacked up, and it was set to no lighting. So this is actually what we were seeing in the demo. If you go to display mode, edit ray trace settings, restore default, and hit OK, it goes back to scene lighting, and then it renders as expected. So one of the lovely joys of live demos, trying to figure that stuff out on the fly, but just setting the render display settings, ray trace settings back to default brought us back. So wish I would have been able to figure that out live on the scene, but figured it out right after and figured I'd throw this in there as an aside. So thanks for watching. Bye.